Thank you for being here today. My name is Bob Bose. I'm the owner of Bose Real Estate in Arlington and a member of the three-person executive committee of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. And before you say, well, why does Bob get to go up there and make these introductions? I was told that I was third in line. Wanted to somehow not do it. So I have the introduction. So I just want to say briefly that as most of us are either residents or many of us local business owners, how much we appreciate the relationship we have with town government. The level of communication, the accessibility that we enjoy, but what I really love is the communication. We hear from the town all the time. Certainly from the Chamber's perspective, we have a seat at the table when there are major things happening in Arlington. Town government's always calling on the Chamber. Please come to the meeting, please participate, please share what's going on in town government with your folks, and let us know what we can do to be helpful. So this is part of that communication, and we're happy you're joining us today. So let's start by introducing Town Manager, Adam Chapdelaine. Looking forward to your remarks.
All right, thank you. Do you mind if we start with going around introducing everyone so I can get a sense of who's in?
I'm Bob Bose, Bose Real Estate Arlington.
Kathleen Garcia, Chamber Savings Bank, board member of the Chamber.
Leanne Rod, Flex Professionals.
Ted Fields, Town of Arlington.
Bob Sprague, YourArlington.com.
Kathy Zolmer, a member of the board, and my business is Nourish to Flourish.
Kara Washburn from Cambridge Savings Bank, and I'm also the chairperson for the events committee for the Arlington Chamber.
Jeff O'Connor with East Cambridge Savings Bank.
Natasha Calista, East Cambridge Savings Bank.
Vicki Giannakis, I'm also an Arlington Chamber board member and Watertown Safety.
Leland Stein, Regent Theater.
Mark Wanamaker, Wanamaker Hardware.
James Milan, Arlington Community Media.
Charlotte Milan, Town of Arlington Public Works.
Amy Taberner, Cyrus Dillon Art Museum and Commission for Arts and Culture.
Barbara Costa, also Commission for Arts and Culture and on the board of the Arlington Center for the Arts.
Ray Hill, I own Hill Studio. I'm an artist.
Ed Gordon, Old Schwal Mill.
Dr. Maureen Gormley, chiropractor, Arlington Heights, and board member of the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. That was my polite way of getting to know the one or two people I don't think I've met before. So James, you're not behind the camera. That's wonderful. That's great. So again, my name is Adam Chapdelaine, town manager here in Arlington. I've been town manager for just over 3 years now. I've been in town a total of 5 years. I was the deputy town manager 2 years before that. I think I've gotten to know most of you in one shape or form and worked on a number of issues with all of you. So last year I gave, in my opinion, a riveting talk on town finances. I had everybody on the edge of their toes, so I thought I'd go in a little bit of a different direction and just talk about some things that are happening in town, recap the winter, which I think was tough for all of us in a lot of different ways. And again, just give some highlights and try to segue into the comments that Ted Fields is going to make more specifically to our economic development efforts. And then from there, I'm very interested in having a dialogue and answering any questions that the members and attendees might have. So to start with the winter, we all know what a terrible winter it was here in New England. I'd like to think it was particularly tough on more densely populated communities like Arlington, just based on the lack of places to push or then remove and store the snow. I talked to the Boston Globe reporter yesterday, and so it's fresh in my mind to give details on how much we spent, which is always a curiosity coming off a winter like this. The town spent just about $2.2 million on snow removal and snow hauling. About $600,000 of that was for salt purchases. Another $400,000 of that was for DPW overtime. An additional $400,000 plus for the contractors we use to plow, because we don't have enough trucks of our own to plow. About another $200,000 for front-end loaders and backhoes to come in and put the snow into the back of dump trucks and then haul it off and store it somewhere. And even maybe more uniquely this winter, we spent $120 grand removing snow from town and school building roofs for fear of collapse. So I think maybe the most interesting point of those figures are, you can have a bad winter, but it's not every year. that you have to get a full team of front-end loaders in to start trucking the snow off to somewhere else. And it's certainly not every year that you have to remove snow from basically every school roof to make sure that you don't have any dangerous roof situations in the town. So I said we spent $2.2 million. That compares to the town's budget of $770,000. So it's about a 300% spend on what the budget was. So that said, we have a plan of how we pay for that. We always have a budgeted amount. We have an anticipated amount of a deficit every year because of the fluctuation in snow spending. We have an operating reserve fund that we can take money from this year. And quite obviously, that amount will stretch all of those very thin and have us still getting a little bit creative in reallocating some other resources, but we'll get it done. Just before Bob introduced me, I was talking to Bob Sprague about the announcement that came out yesterday that Governor Baker was successful in getting FEMA to approve reimbursements, or actually to approve the disaster declaration and have the reimbursements to follow from January 26th through January 28th time period. I don't know how much any of you have followed it. The state, through the governor, had been asking for basically from January 26th to the end of February to be declared one continuous disaster and make all 4 of those successive storms eligible for reimbursement. So far, FEMA and the federal government have said, through the lens that they look at things, no, they don't see that as a disaster. But they have named that first storm, is it Juno? They've named that a disaster with money to follow. So I was just telling Bob, we've already given MEMA, which is the Mass Emergency Management Agency, a lot of information that they've provided to FEMA. So if they reimburse all the costs that we've put together for that first storm, we'd get about, they usually give you about 75% of your costs when FEMA does name something a disaster or declare something a disaster. So we would qualify to get just over $200,000 in reimbursement. So that's the good news. The bad news is when you get it, if you get it, it usually takes about 12 to 18 months to get it. So it doesn't balance the budget this year, but it would help the town's financial situation eventually going back into the town's coffers. So that's sort of the financial side of things. The other side is just, how we all get through the winter. I know for businesses it was a very tough winter, not just in Arlington, but regionally. A lot of reduced foot traffic, certainly a lot of far less people leaving their homes during these storms. I don't know who got it worse, retail, restaurants, probably across the board, I'm sure it was felt. So, the one thing I can look at quickly that tells us what the impact in Arlington is, we have the local option meals tax, and we received the quarterly payment at the end of March that would have had those months contained, and it was somewhat substantially lower than it had been in prior quarters. So I think that was, at least from the town's point of view, a quick bellwether of what the impact was on restaurants. So I'd like for the Q&A portion to hear some of your thoughts on what our process is, our removal efforts. I know we're not perfect, but the DPW team really puts in a yeoman's effort to do the best they can. On the police side, we also do the best we can to try to enforce the sidewalk shoveling ordinance so that people are clearing their sidewalks. I can say from a frustrated point of view, it's also not a perfect science. You can issue people tickets, but if they're absentee landlords, sometimes it can be very tough to gain compliance. So that's an area we're still trying to improve, because even if you don't have a mobility impairment, getting over a big icy patch of sidewalk can be tough. If you are mobility impaired, forget about it. You're landlocked and trapped, and that's just, no matter how bad the winter is, that's not right. So moving on from winter, the other thing I wanted to talk to this group about is parking, first and foremost, in Arlington Center. I know I talked about it last year, and I think at that point last year we had talked about an outside firm, Nelson Nygaard, coming in to perform a study. I think they might have actually wrapped this study by the point we were having a similar meeting last year. Since then, the Board of Selectmen has adopted a set of recommendations based upon that study. They've formed what's called the Parking Implementation and Governance Committee. The acronym is PIG-C. Gotta come up with something probably better than that to refer to it to. And that committee is actually having its first meeting tomorrow. And the Chamber has, the Arlington Center merchants have a representation in Leland. And the Chamber's representative is not here, but I think it's going to be John Hurd. So there'll be multiple business voices on that front. The quick and dirty on that is our plan is to replace the meters and potentially add one in the 2 lots. The the Railroad lot and the Russell Common lot. We've selected new kiosks. We should have them purchased and installed hopefully within the next 2 months, so that's quickly forthcoming. And we also do still intend to start metering Mass Ave to improve turnover and flow and availability of parking in Arlington Center. It's a little bit of a longer term proposition, not too far longer term, but the committee needs to start meeting, select the meter we want to buy, and then put together an installation and implementation plan. What I hope that we can get first and foremost out of parking, well, I think first is better parking regulation and management of the asset, of the parking asset. Second, though, and this was something that Joe Kiro from the Board of Selectmen had really pushed us to take a look at, was the creation of a parking improvement district. So taking money that's raised from the meter revenue and really directly investing it back in the infrastructure of Arlington Center. So we put together a funding structure that will allow for what is not an insignificant amount of money to be able to go towards that parking benefit district. And I think any of us need only walk around Arlington Center to see the sidewalks need help immediately. And I would say that would be my top priority, to use that funding or some portion of that funding to tie in with a project that Mike Rademacher already has, starting to gear up to get public feedback and citizen engagement on what kind of surface and what kind of changes to the sidewalks or improvements to the sidewalks we want to make in Arlington Center. So I think there'll be, again, both a parking benefit in terms of the management and also an infrastructure benefit, which I like to call, it's your business's front door, right? The sidewalk, the street, the infrastructure, that's your front porch when you're welcoming people in. So what we can do to improve that, I think, is very important, or I hope you find very important for the operation of your businesses. A couple other quick things I'd like to touch on. Areas of, I would say, pride in some things we've accomplished. Some of you may know Arlington's a green community. I was just in this room a couple weeks ago talking at EcoFest about Arlington's efforts as a green community. And I think probably, in short, the best thing we've accomplished is when we became a green community, we committed to reducing town energy usage by 20% over a 5-year period. That was one of the things you had to commit to become a green community. So in that first green community class, I think there was 35 or 40 communities that were given the green community designation. Arlington was one of only 7 to meet up with that commitment to reduce its energy usage by 20% in its first 5 years. So we were very pleased with having accomplished that. Another area of focus that we've put a lot of effort in over the past couple of years is transparency in our town government, financial transparency, and just overall transparency. Some of you may have heard about Arlington Visual Budget that we released 2 years ago. It's an online tool where you can see sort of graphically where the town's money is spent. You can actually even put in your average tax bill or your tax bill and see what portion of your tax bill goes to each service. So you can look at how much your tax dollar goes to the police department, public works, to snow removal, to the town manager's office, the best deal in town. And that's sort of a high-level opportunity for people to get a little interactive with the town budget. We also just recently released a program called Open Checkbook, where if someone's interested, they can dig down even deeper into actually every penny that we spend. You can look up by vendor, by department. Payroll information is available. So that just was launched last week, so that's another transparency effort. And on the non-financial side, the Board of Selectmen and the school committee are now using something called a product called Novus Agenda that makes not only their agendas, but every page of material that they use during their meetings available online to the public before the meeting. So we're not the first community to do that, but probably in the top bunch of communities that have done that. And I think it really changes the game about how citizens can participate and understand what's happening at these meetings of our governing bodies. So before, you can see a one-line agenda item. Now you can see that agenda item and you can see the 1 to 100 pages of documents that are attached, and you can either remain upset about what's happening and come to the meeting and talk about it, or you can maybe gain a better understanding of what's happening instead of almost being forced to jump to conclusions.
Very helpful to a reporter.
I'm sure. You can write your stories ahead of time.
I've resisted. I let you discuss it first.
So some people ask me, and I talked with James in an interview about this last week with ACMI, why? Why do all these things? Majority of citizens don't have time to look at these things. might not be all that interested. And my answer to that is, it's the way you build trust, because there are always going to be citizens and people who participate in the community that don't trust, and are going to call into question the actions of the government. And I pretty firmly believe that even if any of you aren't looking at Open Checkbook or at the agenda items on a daily basis, if you know they're available, and you know that the town is making efforts to make information available, you're less likely to think that someone who is highly criticizing the government is being accurate and fair in their portrayal of what the government's doing. So I say that publicly, I say it internally to department heads and other town employees who might not necessarily understand why we're trying to push so hard on transparency, but it's definitely something I'm proud of, that I want to continue to do, and I hope is successful in the town. Outside of that, I kidded about talking about the town's financial situation last year when I was here. That still remains a constant effort on the part of the town manager's office and really all of the departments of town. We have a very robust budgeting process. We have a very also robust long-term budgeting process. Last year I walked through the town's long-range plan. That's still the document that we use to guide our decision-making, guide how much money we spend on town services, school services over the long run, with the whole picture being shaped by the fact that we are 5.5 square miles, 42,000 people, very limited ability to grow our tax base, and thereby very little new revenue that comes into the town budget to be able to support services on a year-over-year basis. And with healthcare costs growing and pension costs growing, our budget grows faster than the revenue grows. Even though our spending per capita is lower than some of the communities we compare ourselves to, so sort of quickly demonstrating that we don't necessarily have a spending problem, but rather a revenue problem based on the constraints of Proposition 2.5. So that's a quick way of saying we govern a lot of our decision-making around that structural deficit and trying to push out the time when the town will need to consider asking for an operating override again in the future. So that's a main focus. Other big focuses we're looking at in the next couple of years, renovation of the Stratton Elementary School. That's going to be designed over the course of the next fiscal year, go to construction in FY17. And then also, the town has recently submitted for the second time a statement of interest for a rebuild or renovation of Arlington High School. That would really be a tremendous and large project. I don't think we could do it without the state's help. So we submitted a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority. They gave us just about a 50% reimbursement for the Thompson School. So that would be around the ballpark of the percentage reimbursement level we could expect to get for a high school project. Winchester High School that just got approved, and I believe is starting construction soon. I want to say it's a $120 million project. They're smaller than us, so in orders of magnitude, you're probably talking about a building project, $120, $140 million for Arlington High School. So getting state support is imperative. So we've submitted again. I don't think we'll find out until later in this year whether we've been accepted into the pipeline. And even if we are accepted into the pipeline, it doesn't mean that a shovel hits the ground next year. It's probably about a 3-year planning process leading into a bidding process. So you'd still be talking about best case scenario shovel in the ground 4 or 5 years away for a high school project. But as that continues, it's a priority. It will become much more of a priority, obviously, if the MSBA accepts us. With that, I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about this morning. So with that, do you want to do Ted first and then we'll do questions? Is that okay? Yeah, well, I think we can do that. So, you want me to introduce that?
Go right ahead. You're doing a fine job at it.
So to talk more specifically about the economic development activities that the town has engaged in over the past couple of years, predominantly through Ted's efforts and also through ATED, the town committee who's also been focused on both tourism and economic development efforts. I give you Ted Fields, Economic Development Planner.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much for coming down to Town Hall this morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I have some technical notes here, so I might refer to them from time to time, but following up from what Adam was saying, Arlington's economy is doing well, according to the latest state data that runs up through the fall of 2014. The town is home to over 1,000 businesses that employ 8,760 people. That's an increase of about 70 jobs over 2013, and roughly the same amount of businesses. And that level of employment is about equal to what the town had in pre-recession times before 2007. So the job losses that our employers had from the recession has pretty much been made up. More encouragingly, that job growth has been in kind of non-traditional sectors. It's been in information, it's been in professional services, as well as the more traditional retail shops that the town is known for. That points to the larger fact that Arlington's economy is diversifying. It's very diverse. We have a large number of firms in healthcare and in professional services, administrative services, as well as a lot of shops and restaurants. And this diversification is good. It's helping the town to respond better to tough economic times, and it's good for commercial property owners. Right now, we're seeing low vacancy rates, especially compared to traditional vacancy rates in commercial property. We're seeing about 3 or 4% vacancy rates in the commercial markets across all types of properties. Industrial and flex spaces has a little bit more vacancies right now than retail space. And office space is in between, it's about 4 or 5%. And recently, vacancies have gone up a bit. You're seeing a few more vacancies, especially clustered around Massachusetts Avenue. But several of those properties are being re-tenanted as part of the normal business cycle. There's several properties that have had businesses where the owners have retired and now they're being relet to new businesses. And it's normal for a business that, or a property that becomes vacant to take a while to become re-tenanted. Several commercial property owners I've talked to have mentioned specifically that given the robust rent levels that they can get from their properties, they're taking their time and selecting the right tenant for their properties. Tenants that are stable, that have a good track record, and that also won't face too much competition or compete unduly with other nearby businesses, so their long-term prospects are good. That's a win for the property owner, and that's a win for the business that goes into tenant that space. And we're looking to see the vacancy rate slowly come down a little bit from the uptick it's been experiencing. And as Adam mentioned, the winter was very tough. It was very tough on our business community. Foot traffic was way down given the snow levels that we had. And the town recognizes that, and we are committed to helping bring more activity, more shoppers, more visitors down to our commercial districts. And there'll be an announcement tomorrow about efforts the town will make to boost activity in our commercial districts and try to help businesses in our commercial districts get more foot traffic and benefit from more foot traffic. On a longer term perspective, the town's master plan is going before the town meeting next week, and that has several economic development components that will help the long-term prospects for commercial property in the town. I think I'll leave it at that as town meeting debates those various measures. But I'm going to wrap up there to provide you more time for questions, but I'm happy to take your questions too. I think I'll sit now. You can fire away.
So if you'd like to ask questions, either Adam or Ted, this would be a good time to do so. I have a question for Adam. As Arlington moves towards metering on Mass Avenue, will that encompass all of Mass Avenue or the 3 business districts?
So my answer to that is, well, the straight answer is starting in Arlington Center. The only plan right now has been approved for Arlington Center. What I think will happen is that it will be such a success in terms of creating turnover and putting investment back into the business district that the Heights and East Arlington will want it to happen. Now, I could be wrong, but I would think that that is what will happen. That if we're successful in reinvesting some portion of the revenue, it will become a benefit to anybody who's on that side.
So as the follow-up is, East Hampton goes to its rebuilding of the new car lot. Will the infrastructure be put in place to tap into that later on?
So we missed that boat in terms of the design of the East Arlington Corridor project. So we'd have to look at whether or not putting holes in the ground for individual meters in East Arlington, if we got there, whether or not that would be the right thing to do, or maybe kiosks, which would be less intrusive into the new infrastructure.
Who has questions this morning? This is our opportunity.
On the subject of the meters,
Yes.
are they going to accept credit cards?
Yeah, so our goal is to do credit card and coin, no paper. And possibly not even offer in the kiosks receipts. We're going to make these things as low maintenance, effective as possible, with as few things as can break as possible. So yeah, credit cards, absolutely.
Just a follow on detail, minimum of 30 minutes, or does it give you an hour?
Oh, good question. So the lots are now going to be unlimited time, 50 cents an hour. And then the streets will all be $1 an hour, 4-hour lots.
Like the minimum that you can put in if you went
Oh,
there
I'm
for
sorry.
10 minutes.
The minimum, yeah, we'll do 30-minute increments, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and we still have, this won't pertain to the lot, but the Board of Selectmen did approve, we want 15 minutes free in all the meters, and the technology does allow, whether it be a button or some methodology, to be able to get 15 minutes free so that we're not burdening people with just stopping in for a coffee or grabbing a newspaper, because they're churning anyway, so
That's right.
we're not trying to hurt that.
Did you say a maximum of 4 hours?
4 hours each street. Yeah, and that came from both the Transportation Advisory Committee's initial parking count study, as well as the consultant's recommendation that based on the turnover that seems to be necessary, that 4 hours would be a reasonable time.
And is turnover, in fact, my sense from what you said is that turnover is in fact the main justification for doing this as opposed to the revenue generation, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, turnover and, yeah, so I would say there's two sides to that turnover piece, that anytime you have pricing, it creates turnover. But if you have mismatched pricing like we have now, then you got the wrong kind of behaviors happening. So right now, we're charging money to be in this, what we call sub-premium parking in the lots, and the premium parking right in front of the businesses is free. It's backwards. I mean, I would imagine most retail business owners want people to be able to come and go somewhere near their storefront. If it's free, anybody can park there. And we do monitor with the choppers and the parking control officers, but it's far less effective than the metering technology.
So I have a question. There was a woman here last year who asked about landlord on Broadway. And I think you probably remember the conversation, but she had it was kind of a resale shop.
Yeah.
And she said, the question was, what do you do when the landlord isn't putting anyone else in? You know, it certainly didn't help her. She has since closed and gone out of business. I just feel like we do have these problem landlords in town. And how do we get around that? I mean, we now have some vacancies where Barbara was, where Derby Farm was, and I think it just makes the town look so terrible when you drive through it and you see all these vacant spots. And I think it's, the same landlord. So what do you do? I mean, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
I take the first crack, and then you can.
Sure.
So you're absolutely right, and I've become very frustrated by this phenomenon. And standing here today, I'm stumped on what the path forward is. I mean, I'm a strong believer, as I'm sure most of us are, in private property rights. I mean, if you own the piece of property, you have a lot of rights to do what you want to do with it. But at the same time, if you're acting as a drag on what's generally been a very good thing in terms of a vibrant and prosperous business corridor in Arlington, it's really troublesome. Especially when businesses that I think a lot of us appreciate are the ones being impacted by it. So, and I think we talked about this when that woman asked last year. The problem is the way commercial properties are taxed, it's based on their income. So there's no disincentive to not generating a lot of income from your property, or at least some portion of the assessment's based on that. So without some state relief on that, and I don't know what the right policy would be. Maybe it would be a local option where you can put a policy in place where you target people who are basically allowing, vacant storefronts or just vacant properties in general. But it's a tricky one. I can't claim to have the solution to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, can there be any zoning or something? I don't even know what the right word is, but for the town to consider vacancies that are long-term, there's a problem, there's an issue there. And I'm sure other communities have dealt with that, but I don't know how.
Well, I think it's hard when really the tools available to the town to address that type of problem are very limited. As long as the property owner pays their taxes, there is really no legal recourse the town can take to influence their business practices, as long as they're not acting grossly outside of the law in how they treat their tenants or the people they have relationships with. I have talked to several property owners who have had higher than quote-unquote normal levels of vacancies just to see what their thinking is or what their attitudes are, and I've tried to counsel them through various situations and issues. And I think actually the chamber can play a role in talking to these landlords as well and trying to gauge where they're coming from and possibly maybe changing their behavior or kind of adjusting their attitudes. Because while they have the rights to their property and using their property within the limits of the law, their property is part of a larger business community and a larger public space, and to some degree what they do on their property does affect their neighbors. And their neighbors, they do have the right to comment to them and then say to them, hey, what you're doing is also affecting us negatively, and let's find a way to produce some positive change.
So maybe that's something that we can talk about moving ahead in the future, how the chamber can be supported in that way.
I think there is a role for the chamber to take and to help make the situation more positive.
Comment and then a separate question. The comment on that would be that Adrian Arch of Public Art did try to talk to store owners, vacant landlords of vacant properties, to see if those could be pop-up galleries. I mean, I think that it was successful for a short time. Was it on Medford Street? And it's it's a nice way.
Sure.
I don't know how it works, but she's gotten a lot of resistance, so she gave up on that. But it was I think a great model, one of the models we could think about. And the other question is more the separate. Broadway Plaza, what are the plans right now for the physical open space there, or what is the status there? Any renovation to that area?
So I think one of the immediate issues is the stairs, the granite pieces were taken out last year, the bricks were laid, and over the winter they've already grown uneven. So DPW is going to take a look at that, try to improve that for both what would I think be a presumed application by Common Ground to do some outdoor seating, and then to also help out Madrona Trees with doing some outdoor seating from there. Going forward, I know the planning department is planning more efforts in terms of redevelopment.
Correct. I will be starting an outreach process with the butters and interested parties to look at a little bit of a longer term vision for Broadway Plaza. Now that the obstructions, the steps are gone, how we can use that more usable area in the best possible way. And I know that the Board of Selectmen has looked at that area for public performances, for street performance permits, and I've looked at some spaces where that could be kind of encouraged in Broadway Plaza, and we'll be talking with, as I said, stakeholders and abutters about how we can really plan the use of the plaza and bring it to the selectmen and talk to them about that and see where we can move on kind of a middle term basis.
Just getting back to the vacancies and the re-tenanting, regarding, are there any presently that are being turned over that you can publicly say at this point what is going in?
Well, there are several potential new tenants that I can't speak about. But there is one new tenant who has opened up in a formerly vacant space. I believe it's at 460 Massachusetts Avenue, Sweet Heaven. It's a candy store. And they are finalizing their permits with the town. And I think they just opened a week or two ago. So that isn't one example of a space that was vacant for a period of time being re-tenanted and reused for a retail business.
There is a nail spa going in where the dry cleaners?
Yes.
Because I saw that and on the building permit. There was a nail spa on that. If you're interested in you getting your nails done. I just wanted to thank you for the, I think, driving around to other towns in the winter, I think the town has done a great job with the snow removal based on what we had to deal with. And also for your foresight, I don't know who thought of hiring an economic development officer for the town, but I just think it's something that we really needed, and it's great having you here, Ted.
Well, thank you.
Wasn't my idea, I can't.
Have you identified vendors for meters?
For the kiosk, yes, there's a company called IPS, forgetting what the acronym is, integrated something, I'm sure. They have some metering in Somerville. They have, if any of you have seen the credit card individual meters down in Davis Square, they're the company that provides those. They also came in with what appeared to be the most impressive technology in terms of the kiosks. So we're going to buy the kiosks from them. And then we'll still do another round of evaluation for the individual meter heads. But I'll tell you, from what I've seen in the industry, they also seem to have the state-of-the-art technology for those meter heads.
But you said in 2 months. You
For the
thought
kiosks.
it'd be implemented in 2 months.
Yeah, we got to just do some engineering in terms of where we're going to put the meters down, ensure ADA accessibility, use it as an opportunity to make sure they're in the right places. So Mike Rodemacher in Public Works.
Put it in the same spot where the fire happened, so we don't lose more parking spaces.
Well, it's interesting. Mike's tried to look at it in that way to see if we can utilize some what would already be dead space that's not in the middle of the travel lane, as I'm sure you've seen in most of the parking lots. Often you're standing in front of the meter and you're right where a car is trying to go through, so we're going to try to improve that situation too.
Okay.
So Ted, you mentioned that there are some economic development components that are going into the town master plan, not approved, but can you give us a sense of what some of the ideas are?
Sure. To encourage the town's continued diversification in terms of employment and the types of firms that we have housed here or that are based here, the master plan calls for the town to encourage the development of collaborative workspaces in town. The buzzword popular in the trade press now is co-working, and it's where small firms, primarily technical firms, they can also be creative type firms, share office space and the amenities of office space that would be expensive for a single firm to utilize. So you'll have several small firms or single person firms sharing a kitchen, sharing printing costs, sharing meeting space. And it's proven a very successful model with tech startups and creative startups. And those type of workspaces are clustering right now in the Seaport, the Leather District, in downtown Boston, as well as in Cambridge, especially around the Central Square and to a smaller extent in Kendall Square. And we think that that type of workspace is a great way for commercial property owners to reuse spaces that become vacant and to re-tenant them with growth type industries or small firms in growth sectors that have strong expansion potential, that could potentially be great tenants down the road as they prosper. They need more space, they could possibly acquire more space within that structure or move elsewhere in town. And it's a great way to incubate small firms in growth sectors that will create a greater demand for commercial space in the town and make the commercial sector more vibrant and help in terms of commercial tax base and help the commercial tax base make it more valuable and relieve strain on residential taxpayers.
If I may, I'd say even more generally, not specifically contained in the economic development component or element of the master plan, is the goal to change zoning to promote enhanced density along the commercial corridors, which would thereby also allow for enhanced economic development.
Can I ask, what kind of zoning changes would be required to do, or would be ideal to do that?
I think that the quick answer is expansion of mixed use zoning, right?
Right, yes.
So to allow for, first floor business, second floor residential along commercial corridors, so the development maybe goes up another level or so.
Right. Or even offices on the ground floor with
Yeah,
residential. But overall, we're looking, the master plan has several recommendations to increase the flexibility of the town zoning, to allow spaces that already exist in town to accommodate new types of businesses, new types of activity, and to grow with the 21st century economy, 21st century society, and to reduce the need to redevelop whole swaths of structures, while at the same time promoting good redevelopment, the type of redevelopment the town wants to see.
Dovetailing on that, that's been suggested of the former DAV up in the Arlington Heights area, where Leader Bank has been redone in that. That's coming up at town meeting. It's been said that the town may sell the property or may renovate the property. What are your thoughts and feelings on that piece right now?
So Ted had advised me to put that into my remarks, and I forgot to do so. So he was right. So the plan for DAV, short-term and long-term, is we're putting together an RFP for a short-term lease that would encourage some of this co-working space or some kind of collaborative usage of the space, as Ted has been describing. When the selectmen held a hearing on the property, a number of groups came in, all in different ways expressing a desire to sort of try to work together to utilize the space on a short-term basis, see if it works. Long-term, what we're going to ask town meeting for this spring is permission to sell the building or enter into a long-term lease. But if we want to even entertain selling it, town meeting needs to authorize us to do so. What I think would be great to do is see if we can lease it out for a year and a half, see how that works, put it on the market for sale. Potentially the folks who are using it have done something so potent that they'd be able to buy it, or perhaps another entity could buy it. And then the desire would be to utilize the revenues from selling that property to go towards capital projects that are in the pipeline, such as the Stratton renovation and or the high school. Mark?
Through the Mass Ave improvement, Mass Ave corridor, in the last couple of years, there were some issues that arose, particularly the bus stop issues. And I know that the town had to comply in order to get the federal grants for the project. And I wonder if those issues are still being reviewed, or is it being resolved, or what's happening?
So on the East Arlington corridor project? Or?
They extended the bus stops in a lot of locations, and there were a lot of complications. I know in one situation, when they extended the bus stop, it actually included a handicap spot. And people were actually parking in the handicap spot were getting ticketed. So there's a lot of issues, I think, that occurred, plus the impact it had on some of the businesses and losing those parking spots. I just wonder if that's still under review, or there's any...
You know, I have to talk with Laura in the planning department and Wayne, the town engineer, Wayne Chouinard. So I definitely recall when we redid the bus stops up in the Heights, they went from, I think they were 60-foot bus stops to one of them became a 90-foot bus stop, which from a traffic flow point of view makes sense, because then the bus can pull all the way in and not be always jutting out. But I thought we had, I guess what I'd call a half solution and reassigned a handicap spot, but I'll have to check that. Let me do that.
It also comes to mind that some of the placements, I think, of bus stops, we've got a bus stop that's 200 feet from the terminal. It's just a lot of little issues there.
That's fair. James?
Yeah, I just wanted to return to what you guys were talking about, the master plan, for a second. And I think everybody's aware that there's this tremendous disproportion of residential tax base and commercial tax base in in the town. And I was just wondering, if we imagine that the rosiest possible outcomes from the master plan process are what come to pass, what can we expect as the most optimistic change to that proportion over the next, 5-10 years? In other words, really, what's a realistic goal for expanding that commercial tax base that you guys were talking about before?
Do you have a quantification of that? I don't know that I have a quantification.
Our planning consultant who helped prepare the master plan didn't have a solid quantification of that, other than to double the current proportion, which is about 5%, 4%, would require a tremendous amount of commercial development to achieve. So much commercial development that there might not be a market for that commercial development. So that is, we don't have a firm quantification, but that's an idea of what it would take to go from about 4.5% to 9%, let's say. So
So we really are talking about, even if things go well with what you're pushing for,
right,
just a couple of stub margins there.
Yeah, my gut would tell me that is the case.
Farmers market, will that be affected by the kiosk? And do you see any plans for moving farmers market from the Russell Common parking lot?
I think we'll consider it.
Consider moving it?
Consider moving it. The board approved it for this year, but the Board of Selectmen has commented such that farmers market and Patsy Kramer should understand that, with some of these parking changes, there might be changes. Certainly changes to the parking pass that has been authorized for the farmers market, and then in the future, potentially considering whether or not it should be in the lot. If usage of the lot during that day and that set of hours doesn't seem to disallow or say that we're using the space, then I think it can stay. But if we start to see that the resource is getting higher demand, then maybe we'll see if there's another place. But I wouldn't put it in absolute terms. I think we just want to be smart about it.
So have you begun giving any thought to how the town might benefit if the Olympics actually come to Boston in 2024? I know it's out there, but if it comes, if we could benefit, or if there'd be any impact? Thanks, it could be no.
So, I have thought about it, and the problem is not dissimilar from our general problem of no space to build anything. So, whether there be some kind of facility that needs to be built, I'm not sure where in Arlington would be a good place. If there was a spot, already existing congestion on the roadways would become problematic. So that's challenging. That sort of just in my mind, no planning or conversations. The only thing I've been able to think might be a benefit would be, if people who live in town chose to leave town and rent their space to people who wanted to come and watch the Olympics, if it happened, would be one possible benefit. The other benefit might be, so we have the Homewood Suites down the end of Mass Ave. Part of the master plan has looked at different parcels in town that can be used in different ways. And I think, I'll speak for myself, another hotel in the right place in town is the kind of development I think we'd welcome. It's sort of low impact development. We get tax revenue from it. They're usually good, aesthetically pleasing tenants. So if there was another hotel here, that could certainly be part of, that total room count mix that you need to have when you have an Olympic event. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think additional hotel space would be a great long-term benefit, because it would help area businesses around it, and as you said, have a fairly low impact compared to other types of commercial development.
Thanks.
No velodrome in
Well, it is an interesting question just in relation to the timing of the high school rebuild.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's not that there is a shortage of university space that might have similar structures, but whether or not they're in a position to be building anything that would be specific to the needs of a summer Olympic program. I think it's worth considering. I think it's a good question.
That's good. It is a good question.
I just wanted to say quickly, next year is the Regent Theater's 100th anniversary, and I'm just trying to take every opportunity at meetings like this so people start to get sick of hearing from me probably, but this is not only a tremendous opportunity publicity-wise for the Regent Theater, but obviously for the town. So I'm just throwing it out there, you know, to the business community, to any potential partners or sponsors, and just generally for ideas, because we're a very small operation running a pretty large facility that is a big magnet for business and bringing people into the town. So we're in the planning stages now of, you know, the programming, but also the facility itself. I think people have seen the scaffolding up front. There's going to be a facelift of the outside. We'd like to raise money to do things in the inside, which very quickly we have an ugly dropped ceiling that was put in the energy crisis of the 1970s. We have the original tin ceiling above that. The original proscenium, which is partially obscured by the drop ceiling, comes up into a big arch with an R in the middle. Those are very expensive renovations to do. We're considering a Friends of the Regent Theater kind of umbrella group, which could help us with some fundraising and grants and so forth, but we're so busy with the day-to-day operations, we're fearful that we might not get to some of these things. So anyone who has any suggestions on that front would be most appreciated.
Can you book the Rolling Stones?
Good idea. They seem to never end their tour. So. I think the closest they're coming is Buffalo this year.
Well, Art Garfunkel is coming.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that we're going to continue to, you know, work hard on that process, and really it is going to be, you know, my idea is to have things throughout the year, maybe with one focused weekend for the centennial. And quickly, one other thing, in June, we've moved the Arlington Alive Block Party to June 20th, the first day of summer. And that'll actually be, June is quickly becoming kind of a month of festivals in Arlington, which is kind of cool. The first weekend's the Greek Festival, the second weekend's Feast of the East, and the third weekend will be the Block Party. So something to look forward to, all those things bringing people into the town.
If this was all your way of trying to get the select tones to perform at the region, I'll see what I can do.
Any last questions at all? Okay, on behalf of our group, we'd like to thank you so much for being here. You know, this communication is so important that it's two-way. It's great that we hear from them, but I think it's great that you guys can hear what we have to say as well. So thanks so much for giving us this opportunity. Thank you all. Thank you.